It's Cheri Dotterer here from the Writing Desk. I'm here with Ashton Rosenhiser. She is a visual note taker, and she is talking to us today about some of the strategies that kids can use or adults can use to help navigate that world of what do I write down? She's coming to us from somewhere up in that northern world of Canada, and it just blows my mind every time I try to talk with somebody. It's like, "You're from where?" Let me look at where did I put it in my notes. What it says is Ashton is passionate about lifting creative spirit in everyone that she meets. Over the past 7 years, she has followed her passion to help people communicate their ideas and combine that with creativity by founding Mind's Eye Creative Consulting. I'm interested to hear what you have to say. Welcome to the podcast, Ashton. How are you really today?
I'm doing well, other than we have a little bit of a storm outside, very stereotypical Canadian kind of winter day. But other than that, I'm so happy to be here chatting with you.
Wonderful. What part of Canada are you hailing from?
I'm on the East Coast in a little tiny province called Nova Scotia. It's
You are
very,
like north of me.
yes, and very in the country. Go into the woods and keep going is usually what I tell people.
Go into the woods and keep going. That sounds like a place that I'd like to visit one of these days in my life.
Mhm.
Before we get started on the interview, I just want to acknowledge Dotterer Educational Consulting as the sponsor of today's podcast. We are putting up many master classes onto the website, sheridotterer.com. If you page all the way down to the bottom where it says courses and then click on the self-study courses, you can find more and more master classes every day. We're trying to go back through everything that we have done over the last 2 years and get things up on the website so that you have access to them. It's no doing me no good putting them in a file on my computer and not being able to share them with you. So look for that as you listen to the podcast and you're going, what does she have there? I know one of them is on form constancy, another one's on dyscalculia. Those are going to be up here in a little bit, but there's more on the way. I think there's coming one coming on IEPs as well. Keep that in mind. Back to note taking with Ashton. Tell me a little bit about what is sketch note taking.
Is a form of visual note taking where you combine words or language with images or drawings. As you're trying to capture information, you're not just doing it in words, but you're incorporating doodles and very simple drawings to help you make those connections in that information.
I'm sorry, doodles and computers don't sound like they go together. Tell me more.
Yes, I think doodling can be a really beautiful way for people to put pen to paper without putting too much pressure on ourselves. Like you can make just random marks to help yourself think, and it's connecting those ideas together. Doodling as just like a form of not even note taking, but like a stepping stone to it can help you remember like up to 29% more information. That's not even putting like any pressure on what it is that you're doodling or drawing. I think it's like can be a beautiful way to help start that kind of journey into what does that look like for visual note taking.
What kind of software or are you using one of those drawing stylus thing? Like how are you getting the doodles onto the computer? I guess that's where my brain got stuck.
Yeah, no problem. A lot of folks, because tablets and drawing styluses are very universal now, it's a very easy way for people to be able to upload a sketching program, a free one or a paid one. Usually the paid ones are still super cheap, but you do not need a program that's very robust. You need a really basic one where you can take your stylus and capture stuff on the screen.
And can you give us some examples?
of programs.
That software, the programs, yeah.
Yeah, the one that I use is called Sketchbook Pro. It is a paid one. I think it's like only $20 and it's just like a fee. You just put it's like a one-time fee. And that's a really good one that I use. For iPad users, the most popular one is called Procreate. Also has a fee. I think it's $18 Canadian or something like that. And it's extremely robust. You can even screen capture what you're doing. It's a very popular one for a reason. And it's got really interesting shortcuts as well that you don't always have to be drawing everything. You can copy things over and stuff like that. But usually I try to encourage people, like, you could always start with a free one, see how you like it, and it might do everything you need it to do. You might not have to pay for one. But yeah, there's Adobe Fresco. There's just so many. If you type in sketching in the App Store or drawing app, you'll be able to find one, no problem.
Years ago, I don't even use it, but years ago, I bought Doodly
Oh, yes.
and I found it very cumbersome to quote unquote doodle on. I guess maybe I didn't buy the right program.
Yeah, I guess Doodly is like very specific in terms of telling a story, right? You're looking to create an animation to tell story, and they have a bank of like clip art images. Yeah, you could certainly maybe create it as maybe you could use it for visual note taking without actually having to write or draw anything. But yeah, I think the purpose of that program in particular is to create an animation video.
Okay. And I think that you used a different program, but oftentimes on my Facebook, I get this thing called Sketch Wow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't
What's
know
the
much about that
difference?
one. Yeah, I don't
Oh,
know much about that one. But I think, yeah, I think it also has more like clip art things, which might be a beautiful stepping stone if or in terms of the drawing aspect of it. But you could go into a program, maybe SketchWow or something like it. I'm not as familiar with that one, and pull in, okay, I like this image to represent this idea that I just learned or something like that. Yeah.
out of curiosity, can you share your screen and show us what that looks like?
Yeah, you know what I'm going to do? Let's keep talking for a minute, and I'm actually going to pull up a case study that I have from a teacher that I am a colleague with. And she worked with a student and taught them visual note taking skills, sketchnoting skills, and followed them over a period of time. And just want to show the progression of now, this was on paper, this wasn't on computer, but you can do both. It's nice to be able to do it on paper because it makes it extremely accessible. You don't need any software or anything like the learning curve. There's no
Mhm.
learning curve. But you can see here, this was the students' notes from freshman year, some examples. And then you can see is after the initial exposure to visual note-taking strategies during sophomore year. You can see here where visual note-taking and sketchnoting emphasizes the synthesization of information. Whereas a lot of traditional note taking, it's very heavy on a lot of words. And we're listening and we're trying to write it all down. And that doesn't do anybody good, no matter if you have dysgraphia or not. It's just like that you're missing out on the learning aspect of it. But by being able to introduce this concept to see how it would work with you, you can see the amount of words that are actually captured are a lot less, but it's not taking away from any of the value or learning. Because sometimes we can actually capture less and retain more, right? What's the less is more sort of philosophy from that. And you can see here the drawings that he's capturing. Some of them are a little bit detailed, but there's a lot of things like arrows and lines to help show the flow of that learning. Even if you don't really know what he's writing here, you can see I can see like hypothesis and then arrows going down. It doesn't always have to make sense to the observer, but as long as it makes sense to the person that created it.
This is happening during class, and this isn't real necessarily happening in the process after class. This is actually happening to make class easier to recall the information.
I recommend that you do it in the moment because then you certainly could try to capture some things and then create it afterwards. but you might miss a little bit of context to be like, oh, I can't remember what it was that they said. Now you can't go back in time, right? If you try to
Mhm.
do that in the moment learning, then you're going to get, by the time that class is done, you're probably pretty much done or just need to add a few little things. And then you have your piece that you just learned about. You don't have to try to then go and remember something later and then capture it. It can be a bit of a stretch for some people to do it in the moment, but it is a fun exercise to try out for sure. And it's just anything, like the more you do it, the better you can get. You can see this was him at the end of sophomore year. There's a little bit more words. The drawings are a little bit more detailed just because he's practicing.
You can increase your retention to more like 29% after you hear something one time. Typically, if it's heard, you see something visual and you hear it auditorily, you can recall 8% of the material. You're saying that with note taking, you can increase that to 29%.
The stat is doodling can help you increase your memory retention up to 29%, right? Might not always be 29, but up to 29%, right? If you're taking, for me, when I hear doodling, it's more so about just making marks to help yourself think, which is like a beautiful reframe that Sunny Brown, who wrote The Doodle Revolution, that's how she wants. There's a beautiful TED Talk that she has that it's quite old now, but still very powerful in terms of redefining what a doodle is. The way that visual note taking, I see it, is like a step up from doodling, where you're taking your doodles and you're making them meaningful. The doodles in their own right are really powerful to help us actually stay focused, right? A lot of people would get in trouble for doodling in their notebook because they think they're not paying attention, but it's actually helping you stay focused. The adding in the visual note taking is just taking that doodle that you might be doing anyways and just making it related to what it is that you're listening to. For this example, you can see he's got some little caricatures and little people and little things related to that topic. So he's got the atomic theory and how he's relating that throughout this visual, right? The doodles and the drawings there are purposeful to that specific learning. It can help us increase the action that we take after that information, after we hear that information and capture it in this way as well.
I am seeing the creation of graphic novels beginning as you're talking versus what I thought you were talking about with doodling when we first began. When I would doodle, I would draw like circles or geometric shapes, and then I would color them in fancy ways and move the pencil in different directions or the pen in different directions to create effect that way as I was listening. But this is purposeful pencil to paper activity. And I just see like graphic novels beginning from these adventures that you're sharing.
Mm-hmm. And the beauty about this is you can do it for however you like, however you want to do it, right? Like these ones are black and white, but you could add in color. It could end up having a very like graphic novel like vibe to it. It could be sectioned out like a comic book. These ones here that he did, like you can see there is a bit of a flow, but the sky's the limit on how you want to create these and what resonates best with you. And some people, they do a lot of drawings in very few words, or a lot of words in very few drawings, or a mix in between. There's no right or wrong way to do it, which is really like a beautiful thing. And his here are very illustrative. Like he really got into it, especially like moving from this here into, like you can see his little person here, into moving into more detailed. You can see he took this on, but it's okay to stick with stick people. You don't have to, really even get started with this with any sort of art background. You don't have to know how to draw anything. And when I started, I didn't know how to draw anything. I came in more from a listening perspective and a thinking perspective rather than from a drawing. You can build your drawing skills over time if you want to, but you can also keep your drawings extremely simple, right? And the beautiful challenge is that learning in the moment and synthesizing and not putting too much pressure on having to capture a lot of words, right?
Yeah. How young would you recommend introducing this technique to students? Because we have that whole learning to read versus reading to learn, and that happens around third grade. Would
Yeah.
you introduce this idea to a kindergarten, first, second grader, or would you wait till later?
What I'm learning here, like where I am in my, every school system is going to be different, but in my school system, they start teaching note taking at age 10, which is grade 5 here. I don't know what that means for other places in other parts of the US or wherever in the world. Um, but that's what it is for here. I would recommend for people around where I am to start at that, wherever they're starting to introduce note taking, and just
Got it.
add it in as an option, right? It's not going to solve all the world's problems. But I
Hmm.
think it's just because what I'm experiencing with my children, because now my oldest is 10, so I'm really starting to learn this, right? And those first elementary years, they're using drawings to help support their writing. And then now I'm recognizing that at grade 5 and age 10, they just take out the drawings altogether. And I'm like, that's unfortunate, right? Like, why can't they say, oh, if you want to keep drawing, you can do it. And here's some ideas and
Okay.
parameters around it, right? Because maybe there's certain learning outcomes and they need to know they know the information, right? But just saying, here's traditional note taking, lines on paper, words fill a page. Or you can do this visual note taking or sketch noting, right? I think I would just love to see it as provided as an option when students are in or around that space of learning note taking strategies and skills. My experience is that when I've gone to teach older kids, some of them get it, but a lot of them are, or some of them really gravitate towards and go forth further with it. But unfortunately, a lot of them were, I already know how to do this other way. I'm fine, right? Trying to now then reintroduce it when they're a little older is a little bit more challenging because they're like stuck in their ways of doing it, like when they
Yeah.
learned it before. They've had all these years to do it this one particular way. I almost find it's like that your early age, or sometimes it isn't until students get to university and things are really complex and they're given the freedom because they can take notes however they want. I find I end up working with and communicating with a lot more university students. It almost seems to be this like early age or university where in between, I think it would be beautiful if it was introduced as well. I think it's just a little bit harder to get people on board and students on board, from my experience, anyways.
Yeah. I wish I would have had this idea about 10 years ago, maybe a little
Yeah.
bit less, but about 10
Yeah.
years ago, because one of the referrals that I had as a direct service provider in the schools was to help a kid with note taking. And she
Mhm.
was struggling so hard to take the main content out of the whatever was presented. I did cyber school long before COVID when it was forced upon us. And this student, what we would do is I would open up TED Talks. We'd
Mhm.
have 18 minutes and there would be like this punchline kind of an idea and trying to get like the main points out of the TED Talk. And she just struggled with that. And it be, I wish I knew how to get a hold of her and I could say,
Mhm.
hey, this is an idea because by now she's going to be in the university and
Right.
probably still struggling because she struggled so much with writing. I see a lot of kids that can create drawings that struggle with the actual letter formation,
Right.
but then I guess see what kids that have struggle with both. But
Right.
for those kids who really are able to draw
Mhm.
with purpose and pay attention, this sounds like a very innovative way of helping them.
Right. And it has to mean something to them, right? If they create a drawing and you as an outsider look at it, it might not, and you were in that same class, you might like, I wouldn't have drawn that, right? It doesn't
Mm.
matter. It's what's meaningful to them. And then they can use like supporting words as many or as a few as they want, right? As long as that learning is meaningful, like it's meaningful to them and it's going to help them, then, like I said earlier, there is no right or wrong way to do it. right? It can be mostly drawings if that's something that they are more strong in than the letter forms, right?
How difficult is the software to get to use it?
The software itself, the only thing that I find is the biggest learning curve for people is the feel of drawing on glass, right? So you can get paper or like paper-like kind of a screen protectors that make it feel like you're drawing more on paper. There's lots of different ones out there, and you can test out like different pen tips depending on what feels more like a real pen, if that's important to you. That seems to be the biggest learning curve for people. Once you get beyond, oh, it feels different than capturing on a piece of paper, it is really nice because it has the flexibility that paper doesn't provide. I actually really personally love the constraint of paper, but the flexibility that digital provides, like you can erase something, you can copy,
Yeah.
you like, oh, I drew that line really well, let's copy it. So there's a lot of like flexibility that I think would be really beneficial
Yeah.
to
My son got this for me for my birthday a couple years ago, a rocket book.
oh, okay, yeah.
And this pen is specifically made for it. And this one happens to have no lines in it.
Nice.
Okay. And so we would doodle. Whoops, get the pen out of here. Come on. Get the pen out of here. Let me, oh, come on. I tried to draw a person. There you
Yeah,
go. Now
yeah.
you can see it. And you see the QR code at the bottom?
Hmm.
By clicking on that QR code with your phone, if it's words, it
Mm.
actually translates them into text that is then copy and pastable to
Right.
other materials, and would take drawings and make them so that they are PNGs.
That's great. That's really cool.
And
Yeah.
then what's fun about it, and I don't, yeah, is on the bottom, there's the tip, it erases, and then you can do it
Nice.
again.
Nice.
That sounds like another form of adaptive device that somebody could use for picture note taking.
Yeah. I think the blank paper, though it seems like a small shift, is a very important one. Because if you're struggling to do the letter forms just in general, now you have to do the letter forms on a line. That's just like another like barrier, right? Whereas the white paper, or it can be any color if you want it to be, it doesn't have to be written all in a straight line. Your letters don't have to follow beautifully one after the other, right? And white paper or blank paper allows a little bit more of that flexibility, which I think is really beneficial as well, right? If
Mm-hmm.
we're really caring about the learning and the comprehension and the retention of that information, right?
Yeah. You mentioned color, and I'm going to bring this up because I actually was doing an evaluation this morning, and it was one of the things that came up. I had a kiddo who squints constantly. We got fluorescent lights around him, and we have white paper. He's having trouble with seeing in general and constantly squinting. And I made a comment in the eval, try putting his worksheets on a different color. You may have to play around with what color that is that works best for him, but try using a different color. And there's a syndrome called Irlen syndrome, IRLENS. And there's certified therapists in around the United States and around the globe that have actually been trained on to try and figure out what color works best.
Mm,
And there's a video that's out there that has a kiddo with like red glasses,
mm,
and he is, because of the red glasses, he's been able to hone down the world so that he can
mm.
actually see the world. He had this compounded thing. It wasn't just visual acuity. It was everything's too bright and I needed to tone down the world a little bit. It's very interesting that you mentioned color.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. I'm sure it'll be really interesting. Maybe somebody who's listening was like, oh, maybe that's something that I'm struggling with.
I didn't mention this as you were doing this, but
Mhm.
there is going to be a YouTube version so that you can see what that visual note taking look like
Mhm.
when you want to look for the Writing Glitch podcast on YouTube, and then you can see what Ashton's visual drawing looked like a little bit ago. Tell me a little bit about what this looks like when you get to the college student. Because I know we talked a little bit about the younger kids, but when you're getting to a college student or you have that gap in between, how do you actually teach? What are the first couple steps to transition a kiddo from that traditional use a lot of words to some purposeful doodle?
First, we have to get over a barrier that a lot of people tend to have is when you say you can draw, they're like, no, I can't. Sometimes there's like a mindset shift that we have to even to have be open to a conversation that you can learn how to draw. Most people have had a negative experience in their childhood that told them that they weren't creative. Whether or not you can remember is probably one of the reason why you believe that you aren't. Right? We have to like rethink that. I think that's like step number one because people aren't even going to be open to this idea, even if it would really be beneficial to them and they'd really love it because having fun is good too. Having fun while you're doing these are like important and should be a priority. We have to like get comfortable with naming ourselves as a creative and being open to even learning. Because that's step number one. Once you're like, okay, I think I can learn how to do this. I think I can get behind it. The first thing that I usually talk about is like some of the things we already did, like plain paper, some suggestions on materials, but like honestly, like keeping it as simple as possible if people have digital or analog preferences. But the very first thing that I teach people how to draw is a line, right? That's our first drawing element is a line. And when you're using these different drawing elements, there's a reason for them, right? In the example that I had showed, the student had used lines and arrows to show direction and flow of the information. That's number one. You can show direction and flow. You can also show separation. I have an idea on the page. I have an idea on the page. Oh, those are actually two opposing ideas. I should put a line through them to show that they don't belong together. Or the opposite, bringing using arrows or lines to connect information, right? Oh, these two ideas ended up on opposite sides of the page, but they actually live together, especially if you're doing it on paper and you can't just move it over. Oh, I'm going to use a few lines to show that these actually belong together, right? And then later on, when you look at it, you'll go, oh, I remember I drew those lines to connect those two because those belong together, right? And then you can also use a line to highlight. So you put a few little lines under a word or circle a drawing to make something stand out a little bit more when you go to look at
Yeah,
it
I
later.
noticed he did a jagged line and bolded a word. I don't remember exactly where that was
Yeah,
to help emphasize it.
you could actually create a very like great sketch note with just some lines. Like it would look pretty visually nice, and it would be even more important than that, it would be purposeful and useful. You've got little bits of information, you have some lines to connect, to show flow, direction, separation, right? That's step number one. That's drawing element number one. And then you take that line and you enclose it. Now you have a container. That container could be a circle, it could be a square, it could be a blob, it could be whatever you want it to be. It could, then you can start playing around with drawings. You could turn that square into something that looks like a notebook or a computer screen, and you can put information or drawings inside of it. Use a container to elevate information, to create distinction between information. Maybe your main ideas are in some containers. And to emphasize, yeah, I think I said this, emphasize an idea, right? Maybe you do a computer screen container because we want to remember that was important. Like you find it on the computer or whatever it is, right? Whatever
Mhm.
that little drawing is that you can create. A line, and now we're taking that line and we're enclosing it. And you can really be simple and just make a square or a circle, or this is where you could start adding a little bit more flavor of drawings and turning a container into an icon. You're well on your way You're like, you can say that you know how to draw now, you know what I mean? It's not rocket science. I think by separating these elements at its very core can help win people over to the idea that you can do this. You don't have to be an artist. You don't have to have any previous art experience. You could have never drawn in your life and pick up the pen and be able to draw a line in a square, right? That's the progression that I usually take people on. And then usually from there, we go into people, which doesn't have to be scary either. You just take a circle and a square and some lines, and now you got a little person. Just put them together and talk about color. And yeah, you can do other things to help make things pop, like add some shadows, but you don't even have to worry about that right away. You know what I mean? You don't even have to worry about like actual icons and drawings. Like just get comfortable doing some lines and some containers. You know what I mean? You could do that for a little while, and then you could just slowly start adding in an icon. Like I drew a light bulb on everything for 3 years because I was like, I don't know what else to draw. I know how to draw a light bulb, and there's always an aha moment or something I really want to stand out. I would draw I got comfortable drawing a light bulb, right? We call building your visual vocabulary, which you can just do over time, right? You don't have to do it overnight.
I see a face, and depending on what you did with the mouth, make the jagged or make the smile or the frown, that you can really emphasize the feeling
Absolutely.
of the content by just what is going on with the mouth on a stick
Absolutely.
figure.
And it just has to be a little circle with two little eyes and a little mouth, right? You don't even have to add in, you can certainly add personality and hair and funny shaped noses and all these things, but that's just, you can do that at any time. You can learn those and practice those at any time. But yeah, you could like adding in the emotion aspect of it is very crucial. I'm glad that you brought that up. Yeah, because when we feel something about what we're learning, it's going to stick even more.
And you can always go back to what the emojis look like on
Absolutely.
your
Yeah,
phone
my
to
favorite.
figure out what to do with the mouse and make and align them that way.
Yeah, and just look at the core elements of it. There's also a thing called like a visual alphabet and how everything can be created by using this little visual alphabet, and a line and a circle and a square are like part of it. So sometimes it's a little bit difficult to wire your brain this way, but like you can look at an emoji and deconstruct it. Be like, oh, how did they make that mouth shape? Okay, they did a line and then they did a U to make it really big. You can analyze it from that perspective because when you look at things as a whole, you're like, oh, I can't draw that. I couldn't draw that little emoji. I'm like, but if you deconstruct it piece by piece, how did they do the eye shape? Oh, I noticed they put the pupil in the very middle. Okay, I could copy that. And it's okay to copy away. That's how we learn and get comfortable doing it.
Now, I want to shift your thought. You're talking about taking notes in class. What about you have an article
Mm.
that you need to read for class? And how are you teaching the students to capture the main points with whatever it is that they're reading?
Mhm. Yeah, there's definitely a couple of different ways that you could approach writing. Now, okay, so I'll speak to one. We'll get one out of the way here first. I actually prefer listening. I do not like reading information. I actually prefer listening to it. I'll put the article in a reader thing and I'll get it to read it to me, and I'll make some notes. And they can be really not formed words, not well formed drawings that I could always create it later, or I could slow it down and see if I could create it in the moment. But articles are formatted funny sometimes. Honestly, a little cheat is I go to the very bottom and I read the summary first. I read because usually there's a summary. I read the summary first and I go, okay, what is it that I'm looking for detail? If this is the high level idea, what are some of the details that I'm going to be looking for when I either read it or I get a computer to read it to me? There's like little cheats and hacks you can do like that.
Are you using a program like Speechify?
But yeah, I just usually just use whatever is embedded in my browser. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah,
Okay.
if I can look it up.
I wanted to identify a source. I have Speechify. I don't always use it, but I have Speechify for when I get journal articles and my eyes are really fatigued and I
Yeah.
need to get it read. And I have Speechify read it to me. And
Yeah.
what's neat about Speechify is Pepper from Iron Man.
Yeah.
I don't remember her name, Gwendolyn something, or Patrick, the guy who played the captain in Star Trek.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Patrick, whatever his last name is, they have their voices embedded into Speechify.
That's
That you can
fun.
get it to read a journal article or something like that, because I read a lot of journal articles in their voice,
Yeah.
and that's fun. If you have any other speech programs that you can specifically think of, you can share them with me,
Yeah,
even
I think that one sounds amazing. If you can get Patrick to read it to you, that sounds good to me. I think that's number one. But yeah, yeah, I think I just have a browser extension, but I'll definitely look it up of what it's called.
oh
But
man,
yeah.
he's just got such a soothing voice, doesn't he?
Oh my gosh, I love it. That sounds amazing. I have to go look that up right away. Yeah, I think we also can give ourselves permission. Sometimes we have to read these things over and over again. Be like, okay, what's the main point here? What's the detail that I need to know? And sometimes it takes a minute of reading it multiple times or listening to it multiple times to understand what it is. And I guess what's the outcome? You always have to think about the end in mind, right? What do I need to capture this information for? Is it to write a paper that I'm going to be graded on? Or is it for fun? Or like, why am I reading this article and what am I hoping to get from it? And I know it sounds like a boring question to ask ourselves, but sometimes it can really help us reframe how we're listening to it if we know what we're listening for. There's also like little things that sometimes writers will put in there to help summarize themselves. They're like, now that we've covered XYZ, we'll go into next one. And I'm like, oh, what did they cover? XYZ. What is XYZ? So you can watch and over time you just get in tune with some of those things. But yeah, and a lot of times people, I know where I'm deviating from article, but a lot of times people will like re-emphasize something or say something more than once. If you hear it one time and you're like, I don't know how important that is, let's move on. And then you hear them say it again, you're like, probably important. They said it more than once. There's things that you can listen for from that perspective too.
Yeah, in my speech generation class that I'm having getting coached on how to write speeches, that's one of the things that they emphasize the same words 3 times in a row with a tail on the end that's a little bit different to emphasize that's important. That phrase is important. The other thing I'm thinking about, and I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy. Have you ever heard of Jeff Brown from Read to Lead?
Not sure. Doesn't sound familiar, but yeah.
I recommend that you get the Read to Lead book
Mm,
because I think that would enhance some of the things that you are doing.
nice.
It is okay. I'm going to step away from the computer once again, just because it's just outside my reach.
Oh, good.
Read to Lead by Jeff Brown
Okay.
and Jesse Wisniewski. They are business productivity coaches,
Oh, yeah.
and he teaches like how to, in a book, take notes.
Mm,
It's a
yeah.
little different than what you're teaching, but I think that
Mhm.
you getting to know one another and sharing with him would be a fantastic combination. I have
Yeah.
to make that introduction because I think that the two of you would be fantastic. How he, on his podcast, he interviews people who have written books on productivity and
Oh,
business.
cool. Nice. Yeah, I love that. I have a book that I wrote called The Beginner's Guide to Sketchnoting, and it walks people
Mm.
through this like very like beginner step by step. And I already told you part of it, right? Like the lines and there's a visual examples of all these things. So there's a lot more drawings than writing in the book, which took it like a little extra longer to create because I had to draw all these pictures. People could certainly check that out. But another book for educators is a visual note taking for educators by Wendy Pillars, Wendy with an I, not a Y. Now that
Her
book,
last name again?
Pillars, Pillars.
Okay.
And that is a good book. I when I set out to write a sketchnoting book, I wanted people by the end of the book, which is not very big, to be like, I can sketch note. I got this. Totally possible. Like the confidence building. I did not set out to write a book on the why, the theory, all the brain science, because that's not my jam. But the visual note taking to our visual note taking for educators that are called, I said, by Wendy Pillars. That is lots of theory, lots of brain science, lots of case studies and stuff in there. If you're like, oh, this sounds interesting, but I want to know more about how our brains connect with visuals and what does that mean and how does that look and the way that kind of thing, that's your jam, I would highly recommend checking that book out if you're into that kind of brain science part of
Wow.
it. Yeah.
Wow. We have sure covered a lot of information in this podcast. How can people get a hold of you?
If you're like, ooh, this sketchnoting thing sounds cool and you want to check it out, you can head over to sketchnote.school. And I've got a newsletter, I have my information about my book, and I've got a community that has a free and a paid part to it. But yeah, it's sketchnoters from all over the world supporting one another in a variety of different industries, from software engineers to educators, right? It's really fun to see and learn and support people on their sketchnoting journey and how they are also like helping others, like some of the teachers in there, and in a variety of different skill level, right? Even if you're a newbie, it's like the perfect spot for you. There's lots of people in there that are quite advanced in their sketchnoting journey, but it's really built with beginners in mind. Yeah, and there is a free part to come in and just play and hang out and learn a little bit as well. So yeah, if that sounds interesting to you at all, then I would highly recommend hopping over to sketchnote.school for sure.
Yeah. And if a parent's listening to this, think about that for your child. How now, as Ashton mentioned, you may want to wait till after they're 10. And if you've got a kiddo who has some ability to make the connections with the language as they're listening, I'm thinking of kids that are really ADD that need to fidget while they're working, or kids with that maybe have autism that need to get some of those extra behaviorals and those extra movements out. That maybe this is a great resource for them as they are moving on in grades. I know that the teachers will allow PowerPoints. I think if you pair that with the sketching, the note taking, that might be a unique, innovative way of helping your kids find their unleashed potential.
No, I love that. Yeah, definitely lots of opportunity. And I feel like we've only really scratched the surface as a sketchnoting community, because a lot of us are like professionals working for clients, which I have been. But in my 2024 priority is to be teaching this, because I think it is such a powerful way for learning and engagement and connections of those ideas. And there's so much opportunity out there to get this skill set into hands of students who could really benefit from it. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you about all this today.
Hey, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Remember, the Writing Glitch podcast comes out on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. You can go to thewritingglitch.com to see past episodes or on your favorite podcast app. Remember, you were put here for such a time as this, and thank you to SAMC Productions for any of the post-production of this podcast. And thank you for being here today, Ashton.
Yeah, thanks for having me.